Welcome to the Philosophical Odysseys podcast. We are diving into a profoundly fascinating piece of literature today, and I have to say, looking over the notes and the source material for this deep dive, it completely subverted my expectations.
Oh, I totally agree. It's a massive pivot.
Right, because today we are unpacking Arthur Schopenhauer's Aphorisms on the Wisdom of Life. And before you tune out, because you associate, 19th century German philosophy with impenetrable academic jargon.
Which is a very fair assumption, honestly.
It is, but we're taking a very specific route into this material. We are looking at it through the lens of a highly regarded Turkish translation by Mustafa Tüssel.
Yes, published as part of the Hasan Ali Yusul classic series.
Exactly, and that particular series is legendary for taking these massive, dense works of world heritage and striving for unparalleled clarity. Which is crucial here, because the Schopenhauer we are meeting today is not, he's not the abstract metaphysical pessimist you might have encountered in a university survey course.
No, not at all.
This is a remarkably grounded, almost ruthlessly practical thinker trying to answer a very simple question. Basically, how do we actually get through a Tuesday without going entirely miserable?
It really is a remarkable pivot for him. And looking at it through Tüssel's translation, which is titled Yaşam Bilgili Uzurin Aphorisms, it adds this really beautiful layer of nuance to that question.
Yeah, how so?
Well, when we usually talk about Arthur Schopenhauer, we are talking about the grand architect of profound philosophical pessimism.
The guy who wrote The World is Will and Representation.
Right, where he basically posits that human existence is a tragic mistake, that we are driven by this blind, irrational, insatiable force he calls the will.
Heavy stuff.
Incredibly heavy. But what makes these aphorisms so captivating is that he explicitly steps down from that lofty metaphysical mountain.
He kind of compromises with reality.
Exactly. He says, in effect, let us set aside my ultimate conviction that non-existence is preferable to existence. Let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that we are here.
We're stuck here.
We're alive, and we have to deal with this empirical reality. So given these unfortunate parameters, how do we construct a life that is as comfortable and free of agony as possible?
It's a survival guide.
It is a survival guide for a flawed world. And examining this through the Turkish linguistic lens is quite revealing. For instance, Tüssel's choice of words, when dealing with concepts like cheerfulness or peace.
Right, there's a specific word there.
Yes, he often taps into the Turkish concept of huzur, which implies a deep, unshakable inner tranquility. It's not just a fleeting, smiling happiness.
It's much deeper than just having a good day.
Much deeper. It frames the entire project not as a pursuit of joy, but as the construction of an impenetrable internal fortress.
That concept of building an internal fortress, that is exactly what makes this feel so relevant right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was struck by how much of this deep dive reads like a modern manual for protecting your peace of mind against a chaotic world. He isn't writing for academics.
No, he's writing for everyday people.
People dealing with annoying coworkers, societal pressure, their own anxieties. And he builds this whole framework, starting by borrowing a foundational concept from Aristotle.
Yes, the 3 pillars.
Right. He divides the elements that determine our fate, the raw materials of our life, into 3 distinct categories.
And to understand our own capacity for happiness, we really have to understand these 3 categories, and more importantly, the severe hierarchy between them.
So break those down for us.
The first pillar is what a man is. This is your core. It encompasses your personality, your physical health, your innate intelligence, your temperament, and your moral character.
So everything internal.
Exactly. Everything that constitutes your internal subjective reality. Then the second pillar is what a man has.
The material stuff.
The material realm. Your property, your wealth, your physical possessions. And finally, the third pillar is what a man represents.
Which is entirely outside of us.
Purely external. It exists entirely in the minds of others. It's your social rank, your reputation, your fame, basically the way the world perceives you.
Okay, so we have what you are, what you own, and what people think of you. Now, if you look at the modern world, it seems fairly obvious that our culture places almost all of its emphasis on pillars 2 and 3.
Oh, entirely.
We spend decades chasing what we have, the investment portfolio, the square footage of our home, and we are equally obsessed with what we represent. Our job title, our LinkedIn profile, our personal brand.
It's the water we swim in.
But Schopenhauer comes in and completely inverts that hierarchy. He argues that the first category, what a man is infinitely and overwhelmingly more important than the other 2 combined.
Infinitely more important. And his logic here is really airtight. He points out that outer reality, the objects we possess and the reputation we hold, only matters insofar as it interacts with our inner subjective reality.
Because we don't experience the world directly.
Exactly. We do not actually live directly in the physical world. We live entirely within our own consciousness. Every sunset you see, every meal you eat, every compliment you receive, it is all filtered through the specific unique lens of your own mind. If that lens is cloudy or cracked or warped, the external world will appear distorted and bleak, regardless of how objectively beautiful it might be.
There's a wonderful example he uses from the text about a reader engaging with a brilliant poem, like something by Goethe or Byron.
Yes, the dull reader versus the poet.
Right. So a dull, uninspired person reads a stanza describing some incredible, dramatic adventure, and their immediate reaction is envy.
They think, I wish I had been there.
Yeah, I wish I got to experience those exciting events. They are envying the external circumstance.
But Schopenhauer says this is a fundamental error in perception. The reader shouldn't be envying the event itself.
Because the event might have actually been miserable.
Exactly. In objective reality, the event might have been quite ordinary. It might have been raining. The carriage ride might have been uncomfortable. What the reader should be envying is the poet's magnificent imagination.
The internal lens.
Yes. It was the poet's profound inner wealth, their rich intellect, that took a mundane experience and transformed it into a masterpiece of human emotion. The magic did not happen out there in the world.
It happened entirely within the subjective reality of the poet.
Precisely.
I found myself thinking about the historical example he uses to back this up, which is Miguel de Cervantes writing Don Quixote. It's such a stark illustration of this exact point.
It really is the perfect example.
Because where did Cervantes write a massive portion of that brilliant, hilarious, world-changing novel? He wrote it in a miserable, cramped, freezing prison cell.
His external reality was horrific.
Right, his objective circumstances, Pillar 2 and Pillar 3, were absolutely abysmal. He possessed no wealth, and his reputation as a debtor or a prisoner was at rock bottom.
But his Pillar 1 was unmatched.
Yes. He possessed an inner wealth, a creative and intellectual fire that was so immense it completely insulated him from his surroundings.
You have to contrast Cervantes in his cell with a dull-witted, unimaginative aristocrat sitting on silk cushions in a palace, dying of absolute boredom.
The aristocrat has the perfect external reality, but a barren internal reality.
While Cervantes has a horrific external reality, but an internal reality so rich it literally birthed modern literature. It perfectly isolates the variable.
If external circumstances dictated happiness, the aristocrat would be ecstatic and Cervantes would be crushed. But the exact opposite is true.
And there is a brilliant linguistic observation embedded in this philosophy. Something we do in English without even realizing the philosophical weight of it.
Oh, the phrase about enjoying yourself.
Yes. Think about the phrase to enjoy oneself. When someone travels to a beautiful, romantic city, we don't actually say, he enjoys Paris. We say, he enjoys himself at Paris.
He enjoys himself. That is so telling.
The enjoyment is not a property of the city. The enjoyment is a property of the self. Paris is merely an external stimulus.
So if the self is anxious, perpetually dissatisfied, or deeply pessimistic, Paris will just be experienced as crowded, expensive, and stressful.
Exactly. The external environment is powerless to bestow happiness upon a mind that is fundamentally unequipped to receive it.
Okay, but let me push back on this just a little bit. I understand the concept that the internal lens filters everything, but isn't there a danger here of slipping into a kind of toxic positivity or ignoring the reality of systemic struggle?
It's a very fair critique.
Because if someone is living in absolute grinding poverty, constantly worried about feeding their children, we can't just tell them, hey, just cultivate a richer inner life like Cervantes. At some point, objective reality forces its way through the door, doesn't it? Does Schopenhauer acknowledge that?
That is a crucial distinction to make, and yes, he absolutely does acknowledge it. Schopenhauer is not a naive thinker. He makes it very clear that a baseline of material security is necessary.
Okay, so he's not totally dismissing the material world.
No, Pillar 2, what a man has, is not irrelevant. It is just secondary. He says if you are freezing, starving, or in physical agony, the demands of the will, that primal drive for survival, are so loud and so violent that higher intellectual contemplation is literally impossible.
You can't philosophize when you're starving.
Right. But his point is about the diminishing returns of material wealth. Once those basic foundational needs are met, once you are warm, fed, and safe, the correlation between acquiring more external wealth and experiencing more internal happiness drops to almost zero.
That is where the modern world gets it wrong.
Exactly. Modern society acts as if the correlation is linear forever. We act as if buying a yacht will somehow cure an existential crisis.
It won't.
No. Schopenhauer argues that once you cross a threshold of basic security, your time is vastly better spent cultivating the richness of your mind than grinding away to acquire an ever larger pile of gold.
Gold that you won't even be able to enjoy if your mind is impoverished.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's about where we allocate our energy once we have the privilege of choice. So if we accept that what a man is, this internal filter, is the primary driver of our experience, what are the actual mechanics of that?
What makes a good filter?
Yeah. What makes up a good internal filter? Because he gets incredibly specific here, and he elevates one attribute above all others. For Schopenhauer, the absolute, undeniable king of all human attributes is physical health.
He is uncompromising on this point. He states that physical health constitutes fully 9/10 of human happiness.
9/10. That is a massive ratio.
It leaves only 1/10 for everything else combined. Your wealth, your social status, even your intellect, all of that is just the remaining 10%.
He offers a stark, memorable comparison for this, right?
He does. He says a healthy beggar is fundamentally happier than a sick king.
A healthy beggar is happier than a sick king. When you read that, it really forces you to pause. Because if you look at your own life, and especially at modern hustle culture, you see people making the exact opposite calculation every single day.
Constantly.
Think about the FIRE movement. Financial independence, retire early. You have 20-something professionals working 80-hour weeks, sleeping under their desks, eating terrible food.
Completely ignoring their physical and mental well-being.
Yes. All to hit some arbitrary financial number by the time they are 40. Schopenhauer would look at that and say they are making a catastrophic mathematical error.
He would say they are destroying the foundation, the 9/10 of their capacity for happiness, in order to acquire a tiny bit more of the 1/10.
That's totally backward.
He explicitly calls it the greatest folly of human existence, to sacrifice your health, the very foundation of the subject, in order to acquire external objects is absolute madness.
You're destroying your capacity to enjoy the world just to get more pieces of it.
It is a terrible, illogical bargain. And right alongside physical health, inextricably linked to it in his view, is the importance of a cheerful temperament.
Ah, yes, the temperaments. He relies on two Greek terms here to categorize how humans naturally process the world.
Yes, the dyskolos and the eukolos.
These two concepts are incredibly useful. Once you understand them, you start seeing them in every person you meet.
They map out human disposition beautifully. The dyskolos represents the gloomy, pessimistic, melancholic temperament.
The glass half-empty folks.
Right. And the eukolos represents the cheerful, easygoing, optimistic temperament. And Schopenhauer offers a brilliant illustration to show how these two temperaments experience the exact same objective reality.
Lay that out for us.
Imagine a scenario where 10 distinct events occur in a person's life. If 9 out of those 10 things go perfectly according to plan, and only one minor thing goes wrong.
The dyskolos completely ignores the 9 successes.
Entirely. They will fixate entirely on that one failure. They will agonize over it, lose sleep over it, and let it ruin their entire week.
I definitely know people like that.
We all do. Now, consider the eukolos. If 9 out of 10 things go disastrously wrong and only one single thing succeeds, the eukolos will rejoice in that single success.
They find comfort in that one positive element, despite the 9 surrounding failures.
Exactly. They find good cheer and a reason to smile.
It's the ultimate glass half full versus glass half empty concept, but taken to a rigorous philosophical extreme. And he uses an economic metaphor to describe the value of this cheerful temperament that I absolutely loved.
The cash versus banknotes metaphor.
Yes. He calls cheerfulness the actual cash, or the very coin of happiness. Everything else, wealth, youth, fame, power, these are just banknotes.
They're promissory notes.
Right. They represent the potential for future happiness, but they have to be cashed in, and their value fluctuates wildly based on the market conditions of your life.
But a cheerful temperament, that pays out immediately, right here, right now, in the present moment. If you're cheerful, you are currently experiencing the payout.
It is the only true currency.
It really is. And this leads us to what is perhaps the most counterintuitive, genuinely surprising insight in the entire text. It requires a complete rewiring of how we think about a good life.
This is where he brings in Aristotle again.
Yes. Schopenhauer lays down what he considers the supreme rule of life, a principle he adopts directly from Aristotle. The rule is simply this: the wise man seeks not pleasure, but freedom from care and pain.
Seek freedom from pain, not pleasure.
Yes.
That goes against literally every advertisement we see, every self-help guru on social media, every cultural narrative we are fed from childhood.
It is a radical departure from modern norms.
We're constantly told to maximize our joy, to chase our bliss, to curate a life filled with peak experiences. To actively not seek pleasure sounds like a recipe for a completely sterile, boring existence.
It sounds restrictive.
If I don't risk the pain of a broken heart, I never get to experience the profound joy of falling in love. Is Schopenhauer seriously suggesting we just sit quietly in a padded room to avoid getting hurt?
It is a profound challenge to our sensibilities, and your reaction is exactly what he anticipates. But he is not advocating for a cowardly life. He's making a structural, almost mathematical argument about the nature of consciousness.
Okay, walk us through the math.
To understand this, we have to grasp a philosophical premise that sounds strange at first. He argues that pain is positive and pleasure is negative.
Positive and negative, but not in a moral sense.
Correct. He does not mean positive as in morally good and negative as in morally bad. He is using these terms in an active versus passive sense.
Okay, active versus passive.
Pain is positive because it is active. It makes itself felt directly. It asserts its existence forcefully upon your nervous system and your consciousness.
You can't ignore pain.
You can't ignore it. Pleasure, on the other hand, is negative because it is merely the temporary absence of pain or the momentary fulfillment of a lack or a desire.
The metaphor he uses for this is so viscerally relatable. He talks about the human body.
Yes, the health metaphor.
Imagine you wake up and your body is perfectly healthy. Your heart is pumping, your lungs are expanding, your digestion is working smoothly. You do not walk around all day acutely feeling the glorious, euphoric sensation of a healthy spleen, right?
No, you don't even think about your spleen.
You don't consciously feel the total health of your body. Health is a baseline. It goes unnoticed.
It's negative in the philosophical sense. It's an absence of distress.
But if you get one tiny annoying paper cut on your index finger, or if you have a slight toothache, what happens?
Your entire consciousness fixates on that one tiny point of localized pain.
Exactly. The overwhelming majority of your healthy body completely disappears from your awareness, and the tiny percentage of pain entirely dominates your reality.
Precisely. Pain demands attention. Comfort does not. Because pain is the active, forceful element of existence, and pleasure is merely the quiet baseline when pain is removed. A life guided by wisdom must focus on minimizing the active, disruptive element.
Minimizing the pain.
Yes. If you make it your life's primary goal to chase intense, euphoric pleasures, the peak experiences you mentioned, you are constantly putting yourself in positions of high risk, high expectation, and inevitable disappointment.
You're playing a dangerous game.
You are playing a casino game where the house, which in this case is the chaotic, unpredictable nature of reality, always wins eventually.
Therefore, Schopenhauer suggests a radical shift in how we evaluate our lives.
A total paradigm shift.
You should not measure the success of your life by making a list of the intense joys, the wild parties, or the triumphs you've experienced. That is using the wrong measuring stick.
It's focusing on the illusions.
You should evaluate your life by the evils, the pains, the diseases, and the catastrophes you have successfully managed to avoid.
I know it sounds dark, but there is deep wisdom there.
I have to admit, once you get past the initial shock of it, there is something incredibly comforting about that perspective. It takes so much pressure off the daily grind.
It really does.
If you get to the end of a Tuesday and nothing terrible happened, you didn't get sick, you didn't get into a fender bender, you didn't have a screaming argument with a family member, Schopenhauer is basically saying, congratulations, you won the day.
You successfully navigated the minefield.
It completely redefines what a successful day looks like. But it does leave us with a massive practical problem.
Which is?
If the ultimate goal is simply avoiding pain and avoiding trouble, what on earth do we do with our time? If we insulate ourselves from all risk, won't we just slowly go insane from boredom?
And there you've identified the grand pendulum of human suffering.
The pendulum.
Yes. Schopenhauer points out that human life swings relentlessly between two fundamental poles, two great foes of happiness, pain and boredom.
Pain and boredom.
And the tragic irony of the human condition is that these two are inversely related. As you manage to move further away from one, you inevitably move closer to the other.
So you can never truly escape both.
Not without a specific defense. But look at the societal level. The poorer classes, those struggling for basic survival, are locked in a constant daily battle with pain. Hunger, cold, physical exhaustion, financial insecurity.
Right, their struggle is immediate and physical.
But the wealthy classes,
Yeah.
who have successfully insulated themselves from physical pain and material want, find themselves face to face with the crushing existential dread of boredom.
It's like escaping a tiger only to realize you are stranded in the middle of a barren desert.
That's a great way to put it.
You survive the acute threat, but now you have an endless expanse of nothingness to deal with. But Schopenhauer doesn't just leave us stranded in the desert, does he? He says there is a defense mechanism against this pendulum, specifically against the threat of boredom.
Yes, and it circles right back to his first pillar, what a man is. The depth and quality of your inner wealth.
The internal fortress again.
Exactly. A person who has cultivated a rich intellect, a vibrant imagination, and a genuine, deep-seated curiosity about the mechanics of the world possesses an impenetrable internal fortress against boredom.
They don't need external entertainment.
You can place this person in a quiet room with absolutely nothing but their own thoughts, and they will find endless entertainment and stimulation. They can philosophize, they can mentally deconstruct a piece of music, they can observe the subtle play of light on a wall.
They are entirely self-sufficient in their happiness.
Yes. And to highlight this by contrast, Schopenhauer introduces a highly specific and frankly brutal definition of a character he calls the Philistines.
The Philistines. He does not hold back when describing this type of person.
He really doesn't.
How does he define it in this context? He says, a Philistine is a human being who operates with absolutely no intellectual needs.
None whatsoever.
They don't care about art for the sake of exploring human nature. They don't care about philosophy. They have no desire for deep understanding or intellectual challenge.
Their internal world is barren.
And because they have this massive internal void, a complete lack of inner wealth, they are forced to desperately seek all their fulfillment from the outside world.
They're dependent on Pillar 2 and Pillar 3.
Exactly. He paints this incredibly vivid, almost tragic image of the Philistines' peak existence. He says their highest ideal of happiness is oysters and champagne.
Oysters and champagne. It is pure, unadulterated, fleeting physical and sensory consumption.
It's all just sensory input.
It is one of the most profound critiques of materialism in 19th century philosophy, and it maps perfectly onto our modern behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the Philistines has no inner resources. Sitting quietly in a room is a form of literal torture for them. They are forced to constantly consume external events just to stave off that crushing weight of boredom.
They need the loudest parties.
The highest stakes at the gambling table. The most exotic travel destinations. They run frantically from distraction to distraction because the terrifying truth is the moment they stop moving, they are left entirely alone with themselves.
And they find that company to be completely empty.
Yeah.
Think about how deeply, how uncomfortably this applies to us right now. Think about the modern architecture of consumerism.
The attention economy.
Yes, think about the smartphone, the endless scroll, the algorithms designed to constantly feed us novelty.
It's terrifying when you frame it like that.
Are we, as a society, constantly checking our feeds, buying things we don't need on Amazon at 2 a.m., filling every single silent moment with a YouTube video or a podcast present company, accepted, naturally, because we are terrified of being alone with our thoughts?
It's a very real possibility.
Are we acting exactly like Schopenhauer's Philistines, just substituting digital validation for his oysters and champagne? It is a chilling question. We seem to lack the inner wealth to just sit quietly and exist.
It is a vital question for self-reflection. If you find that you are constantly desperate for external distraction, it is a glaring warning sign that you are neglecting your inner resources.
You have to build up that intellectual capital.
You must. So you aren't completely dependent on the whims of the outside world to keep you entertained.
And this dependence on the outside world bridges perfectly into our discussion of the third pillar of human destiny, what a man represents.
Because if the Philistine relies on the outside world for entertainment, it is a very short leap to realize they also rely entirely on the outside world for their sense of self-worth.
Exactly. This is where Schopenhauer launches his absolute dismantling of vanity and the folly of placing our happiness in the opinions of other people.
The third pillar. What other people think of you.
Schopenhauer believes that building the foundation of your happiness on the shifting sands of public opinion is one of the most disastrous, illogical mistakes a human being can make.
It is handing over the keys to your sanity.
And to unpack why it's so foolish, he draws a razor-sharp distinction between two concepts that we constantly conflate in everyday language: pride and vanity. I have to admit, reading this completely changed how I use these two words.
It is a crucial philosophical distinction.
Uh,
We often use them interchangeably as negative traits. Right?
yeah, being proud or being vain both sound bad.
But Schopenhauer argues that pride is actually a deeply positive, necessary characteristic, while vanity is a fatal flaw.
How does he differentiate them?
Pride is a firm, unshakable, internal conviction of your own supreme worth in a particular area. It relies on an objective assessment of your own abilities.
It's an internal certainty.
Yes, it does not require anyone else to agree with you. Because it is so fundamentally secure, pride is naturally tacit, calm, and silent. You do not feel the need to shout about how competent you are if you genuinely deeply believe it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Vanity, however, is the exact opposite. Vanity is a desperate, insecure attempt to get others to believe in your worth, usually driven by the hidden subconscious hope that if you can convince the crowd, you might finally be able to convince yourself.
Therefore, vanity is loud, talkative, boastful, and constantly seeking validation.
Pride is silent. Vanity is talkative.
That is so observant. The truly proud person, the master craftsman, the brilliant writer who knows their work is good, they just do the work. They don't need the applause.
They don't care about the applause.
The vain person is constantly fishing for compliments, constantly curating their image because their self-worth is entirely outsourced to the opinions of the crowd.
And this outsourcing of self-worth leads Schopenhauer into a fierce, extended critique of something that was a massive, bloody part of culture in his time, and the psychological remnants of which are still very much with us today.
You're talking about chivalric honor.
Yes, the culture of dueling.
This is where his pragmatic analysis really shines, and where his contempt for irrational societal norms becomes highly entertaining.
He pulls no punches here. Schopenhauer views the entire concept of chivalric honor, the idea that if someone insults you, your honor is physically diminished, and it can only be restored by physical violence or a duel to the death, as an intellectual and moral monster.
He points out that this is a sickness entirely unique to modern times, completely unknown to the great philosophers, warriors, and thinkers of antiquity.
Right. To illustrate how utterly absurd this modern honor culture is, he contrasts it with the behavior of the ancients. He brings up a famous anecdote about Socrates.
Oh, I love this story. Socrates was out walking in Athens, and a man, for whatever reason, viciously kicked him.
Just walked up and kicked him.
Right. And Socrates did not draw a sword. He did not challenge the man. He simply kept walking, completely ignoring the assault.
Total indifference.
When asked by his stunned followers why he didn't retaliate or seek justice for the insult, Socrates replied with perfect stoicism, "If a donkey kicked me, would I take it to court?"
If a donkey kicked me, would I take it to court? It's brilliant.
I mean, what an incredible response. Socrates is displaying true pride there. His internal sense of worth is so profoundly secure that a physical insult from a fool doesn't even register as an attack on his honor.
It's just a random force of nature, like a sudden rainstorm or a branch falling from a tree. You don't get angry at the branch.
But modern honor culture, and honestly a lot of modern internet culture, says that if someone insults you, your honor is literally destroyed until you retaliate.
It's giving complete, terrifying power over your self-worth to the most ill-intentioned, foolish, or aggressive people in society.
Any idiot can ruin your day or end your life simply by hurling an insult.
Exactly. It makes the integrity of your identity utterly dependent on the worst elements of society. You are giving the keys to your emotional state to a stranger.
And because Schopenhauer views this as a profound societal disease, he actually steps into the realm of public policy.
He does, which is rare for him.
He offers a specific proposal for governments to eradicate the practice of dueling once and for all. And it is incredibly revealing of his pragmatic, unsentimental approach to human psychology. I promised a hilarious solution earlier, and this is it.
It's brilliantly petty.
It is so brilliant. Schopenhauer says, look, governments keep trying to stop aristocratic dueling with heavy, dramatic laws. They threaten duelists with years in prison or even the death penalty, and it never works.
Because the punishment feeds the vanity.
Exactly, because these men care more about their precious honor and how they look to high society than they care about their own lives. So Schopenhauer proposes a homeopathic remedy.
A homeopathic remedy for vanity.
He says, pass a law stating that anyone who challenges another person to a duel, and anyone who accepts that challenge, will be immediately taken to the public square in broad daylight and given 12 lashes with a stick by a corporal.
That's it?
That's it. No grand trial, no romantic execution, no prison time, just a public Humiliating, painful spanking.
It is brilliant because it perfectly targets the psychological root of the behavior. Schopenhauer realizes that the root of dueling is not bravery or a lack of fear of death. It is an overabundance of vanity and a paralyzing fear of looking foolish or cowardly in front of the social elite.
So you attack the fear of looking foolish.
By punishing a duel not with a dramatic, tragic, romanticized death, but with a deeply embarrassing, undignified, and entirely unchivalric beating with a stick, he completely punctures the balloon of toxic ego.
He destroys the romance of the duel.
A nobleman might be perfectly willing to take a bullet to the chest for his honor, but he will absolutely never risk being publicly paddled like a disobedient schoolboy.
It is an ego-destroying solution to an ego-driven problem. It completely dismantles the toxic masculinity of the era without firing a single shot. It exposes the whole system as a fragile, absurd game of pretend.
It really does.
I feel like we could apply that logic to so much of modern clout chasing and internet arguments. The fear of embarrassment is infinitely stronger than the fear of actual consequences.
Without a doubt.
But if we're talking about public perception, we have to move up the ladder. If honor is the baseline of what people think of you, fame is the absolute stratosphere. What about the desire to be remembered forever?
Indeed. Schopenhauer differentiates very carefully between honor and fame. Honor is essentially a negative quality. It is simply the absence of a bad reputation. It is expected of everyone.
That's the baseline.
Everyone starts their adult life with honor, but it is incredibly fragile. It can be lost completely and forever with one single bad deed, one public mistake, or one lapse in judgment.
But fame is different.
Fame, or glory, on the other hand, is a positive quality. It is exceptional. It is not expected of anyone. It is incredibly hard to win, requiring immense effort, rare talent, and often perfect timing.
But crucially, once true fame is earned, it is almost impossible to lose.
True.
And he makes a really important granular distinction about how you achieve that true fame. He divides it into two paths: fame achieved through deeds and fame achieved through works.
Unpacking that difference is key because it dictates how long that fame lasts.
Right, so break down deeds versus works.
Fame achieved through deeds. These are actions, military conquests, brilliant political maneuvering, great athletic achievements, is loud, immediate, and often highly celebrated in the moment.
The hero of the day.
But it is fundamentally temporary. Deeds exist only in a specific fleeting moment in time. Once the moment passes, the deed is gone forever.
Its fame depends entirely on the memories of witnesses.
The shifting tides of public opinion and the accuracy of historians. Over time, memories fade, records are lost, context changes, and the fame inevitably diminishes.
But works are different.
Fame achieved through works, however, writing a great book, composing a symphony, discovering a fundamental scientific principle, is permanent.
Because the work itself survives.
Exactly. A work, like the writings of Plato or the architecture of a great cathedral, exists independently of the creator's time. It can be handed down directly from generation to generation, allowing future minds to experience it exactly as the creator intended. Therefore, works have the capacity for true immortality.
But there is a massive catch to true fame, especially the kind achieved through brilliant works. And it's a catch that perfectly explains why so many of the greatest artists, thinkers, and innovators die penniless, unrecognized, and ridiculed.
It's bitter reality.
Schopenhauer points out that true fame almost always comes posthumously. You have to die first to get the credit.
And why is that?
Because of the absolute, petty, suffocating envy of your contemporaries. He basically says that the secret, unspoken slogan of human society, whenever it is faced with true, undeniable genius, is down with merit.
Down with merit. It is a decidedly dark view of human nature.
People cannot stand the psychological friction of seeing someone in their own peer group rise significantly above them. It makes them feel small.
So they intentionally ignore, belittle, or actively suppress true greatness while the creator is alive. This is supported by a mountain of historical evidence across the arts and sciences. Contemporaries are blinded by envy and proximity. They cannot see the forest for the trees.
To illustrate this bitter reality, Schopenhauer includes a fantastic quote by the French philosopher D'Alembert regarding the metaphorical Temple of Fame.
Yes, the Temple of Fame quote. It is so sharp.
He says the Temple of Fame is filled entirely with the dead who weren't there when they were alive, while the living are thrown out as soon as they die.
Which means the people who are famous right now, the celebrities of the day who are universally loved by their contemporaries, are usually producing shallow, easily consumable, non-threatening material that will be forgotten the second they die.
While the true geniuses, the ones who will be revered in the Temple of Fame for centuries to come, are currently standing outside in the cold, completely ignored or mocked by their peers.
So if you are universally loved by everyone right now, Schopenhauer would probably say you are producing mediocrity.
It's a sobering thought for anyone chasing viral fame.
Very sobering. So we have dismantled our reliance on the opinions of others. We recognize that our peers are driven by envy, and we know fame is a trap. But we still have a practical problem.
We still have to actually live among these people. We cannot all retreat to a cabin in the woods and become hermits.
No, we have to function in society.
So how do we navigate this? Schopenhauer provides what can only be described as a masterclass on social survival. This is a collection of advice for walking out your front door every day. It is cautious, highly protective, and deeply insightful regarding human nature.
Let's go through these survival tactics because they are incredibly practical.
First, he warns against the danger of living in the future. We touched on how the FIRE movement does this, but he uses another perfect animal metaphor here. He compares a person who is constantly planning for the future, constantly delaying their happiness for some hypothetical future date, to an Italian donkey with a stick tied to its head.
With the hay dangling in front of it.
Exactly. Dangling from the end of the stick, just inches out of reach, is a bundle of hay. The donkey walks and walks, pulling the cart, constantly chasing the hay it can never reach.
And because it is so focused on the illusion ahead, it never stops to rest or eat the grass that is actually growing around its feet.
By constantly living in the future, we ruin the only reality that actually exists, the present moment.
A vital warning against the illusion of delayed gratification taken to an extreme.
Next, he extols the immense protective value of solitude. Now remember his underlying premise. Human beings are largely driven by selfish, irrational will, making them, generally speaking, poor company.
He states a brutal equation here. Sociability is inversely proportional to intellect.
Meaning, the smarter you are, the richer your inner life, the less you will tolerate or desire the superficial chatter of large groups of people.
He quotes Voltaire here, who said, "The earth swarms with people not worth talking to."
Harsh, but we've all felt it.
But since we must interact, the goal, Schopenhauer devises, is to learn how to be in society but remain objectively detached from it. He uses the metaphor of a fire on a cold night.
A wise person sits at a safe distance to enjoy the warmth, while a fool walks right into the flames, gets terribly burned, and then runs out into the cold, complaining about how dangerous the heat is.
You must maintain a safe psychological distance. Keep the firewall up. Don't overinvest emotionally in acquaintances.
And speaking of keeping your guard up, his advice on testing friends is brutally cold, but I think everyone listening has experienced this.
The test of a true friend.
He says the ultimate test of a friend is not how they react to your good news. Anyone can celebrate with you. The real test is how they react when you tell them about a recent misfortune, a failure, or a moment of deep embarrassment.
A true, rare friend will show pure, unadulterated sorrow.
But most people, even those you consider good friends, will struggle to hide a barely concealed faint smile of satisfaction. They will say all the right, comforting words, they will pat your shoulder, but deep down, your failure makes them feel just a little bit better about their own mediocre lives.
It's the concept of schadenfreude, taking pleasure in the pain of others. And Schopenhauer believed it was a fundamental, if ugly, part of human nature. Recognizing this doesn't mean you hate your friends. It just protects you from naivete.
Building on this need for protection, he strongly advises keeping secrets. He argues you should strive to remain a mystery even to your close acquaintances.
Because any personal information you give them, any vulnerability you expose, can and likely will be used against you when circumstances change or when their envy is triggered.
He offers a profound rule for demonstrating intelligence in social settings. Show your intellect through what you remain silent about rather than what you say. Speaking is almost always an act of vanity. Remaining silent is an act of prudence and pride.
Show your intellect through what you remain silent about. It's so contrary to our culture of oversharing. We feel this intense pressure to voice our opinion on every single topic. The restraint required to just observe and stay silent is immense.
And the final piece of social survival advice in this section is a tool for dealing with the inevitable friction of public life. I call it the stone on the road rule.
Oh, this is excellent for daily life.
How do we deal with the daily microaggressions? The rude barista, the guy who cuts us off in traffic, the petty passive-aggressive emails. Schopenhauer says you must treat these things simply as inanimate stones on your path.
If you are walking down a pleasant road and you encounter a stone, you don't stop. Interrogate the stone and scream at the stone for being in your way.
You don't take the stone's presence as a personal insult. You simply step over it and keep walking. Do not let the petty actions of foolish people enter your mind or your heart. Step over them.
It is an exercise in radical emotional detachment, designed specifically to preserve your inner peace against the relentless friction of daily life.
And this continuous, lifelong effort to navigate society, avoid pain, and protect our inner wealth brings us to our final exploration, where Schopenhauer pans the camera all the way back to look at the entire arc of human existence.
He breaks down the distinct stages of life, moving from the poetry and innocence of youth to the disillusionment and ultimate peace of old age.
This breakdown of the ages of life is incredibly poignant, almost poetic. Let's walk you through this arc. It starts, of course, with childhood.
Schopenhauer calls childhood a lost paradise, and his reasoning ties back into his core philosophy. Why is it paradise? Because it is the only time in our entire lives when we operate purely on curiosity and not on the demands of the will.
Remember, the will is the source of all suffering. It is desire, ambition, hunger, lust.
But children, by and large, don't have that driving them yet. They just want to look at the world. The text has this beautiful, haunting quote, "To see all things is wonderful, to be them is terrifying. Children are just seeing."
Yes, children function almost entirely as pure subjects of knowing. They look at a dog or a massive tree or a rainstorm, and they don't see how it can be used for profit or what threat it poses to their social standing. They see the universal Platonic idea of the thing. Every object is a fascinating, miraculous representative of its kind.
And Schopenhauer grounds this philosophically and physiologically. He notes that the human brain reaches its full physical adult size around age 7. So you have this fully formed, massive organ of intellect, but a very small, undeveloped organ of will and physical passion.
The child is a learning machine, perfectly designed for absolute absorption and wonder.
But then paradise is lost.
We grow up, we enter adulthood, and this is where the will takes the steering wheel. The passions awake, ambition, greed, romantic desire, they all drag us into the fray. We stop observing the world with wonder and start trying to conquer it.
We chase the illusions that society sets up for us. We chase the wealth, the status, the perfect romance, only to meet the brutal reality of pain, disappointment, and the constant friction of competing with everyone else's will. Adulthood is the battlefield.
It is the period of maximum suffering precisely because it is the period of maximum desiring. But then, if we survive the battlefield, we reach old age.
Now, Schopenhauer does not sugarcoat the physical decline of aging, and he notes the psychological phenomenon where time seems to speed up drastically. Days fly like arrows, as he puts it.
But contrary to what we might expect from the world's most famous pessimist, he views the psychological and emotional state of old age as a profound achievement of peace. The defining characteristic of old age, he argues, is disillusionment.
And he means this entirely as a positive, liberating thing.
Disillusionment as a positive, it flips the word on its head. In adulthood, we are under the spell of illusions. We genuinely believe that getting that promotion will fundamentally change our happiness. We think that being famous will cure our deep-seated insecurities.
But in old age, the spell finally breaks. The deceptive glitz and glamour of the world are finally seen for what they truly are, empty.
The driving passions and desires that tormented us for decades finally fade away. We stop caring about what the crowd thinks. We finally viscerally realize the truth of Aristotle's rule, that a painless, quiet existence is the highest possible good. We stop chasing ghosts.
Exactly. The frantic, exhausting pursuit stops. To illustrate this profound shift in perspective, he offers a magnificent metaphor. He compares a human life to a beautifully embroidered tapestry.
The tapestry of life.
In our youth and throughout the striving years of adulthood, we are looking at the front of the tapestry. It is colorful, full of vibrant pictures, dramatic scenes, and seemingly obvious important meaning. We're captivated by the image.
But in old age, we are finally permitted to look at the back of the tapestry.
The back is not as pretty. It lacks the vibrant colors and the clear, dramatic pictures. But crucially, looking at the back shows us exactly how all the threads connect. It reveals the underlying structure, the hidden causes, the messy knots, and the true nature of the picture we spent our whole lives admiring.
We finally understand how the whole illusion was put together.
We see the knots and the loose threads that made up the illusion.
So, looking at this whole journey, let's synthesize what we've learned. We started by expecting doom and gloom, but Reading these aphorisms feels completely different. It's strangely empowering.
It is empowering. If we synthesize everything we've discussed today, from the subjective lens to the rejection of vanity to the embrace of solitude, the ultimate takeaway is that in this specific work, Schopenhauer is a fierce pragmatist.
He is offering a tactical survival guide.
By intentionally lowering our expectations of the world, by recognizing and avoiding the exhausting traps of vanity and public opinion, by actively cultivating our own inner intellectual wealth so we are insulated from boredom, and by focusing our energy on avoiding pain rather than frantically chasing fleeting pleasures, we can actually navigate this difficult existence with grace, dignity, and a profound inner peace.
It is a philosophy of defense, and it is highly effective. It is a heavy, brilliantly forged shield against a tough world. And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
We talked about how old age brings that beautiful, peaceful disillusionment, that ability to look at the back of the tapestry and see the illusions for what they are.
But what if you didn't wait? What if you didn't wait until you were 70 or 80 years old to look at the back of the tapestry?
What if, starting today, you viewed your life's minor annoyances, the desperate opinions of your coworkers, and your own burning desires for status through the calm, disillusioned, and incredibly peaceful eyes of your 70-year-old self?
If you could borrow that perspective today, how much lighter would you feel? Don't forget to follow us and subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes, and never miss a step in this odyssey of thought. Until next time, keep questioning.